to the She Leads podcast. I'm your host, Adrienne Garland, CEO and founder of She Leads Media, a global media company dedicated to the advancement of women leaders and entrepreneurs worldwide. I'm also an adjunct professor at NYU and Rice University, where I teach on the topic of entrepreneurship. I'm a mom to two wonderful young men and married to my best friend from college. Join me each week as I dive into raw conversations with remarkable, uncompromising, and inspirational women entrepreneurs and leaders. My hope is that these conversations and their advice will encourage you to put yourself out there and gain the visibility that you and all women deserve. We're all about stripping away the sugar-coated conversations and moving boldly in the direction of our magnificent dreams. For far too long, women have been conditioned to soften their words, modify their actions, and show up in the world to conform to outdated at best and harmful at worst cultural norms and ideals. Why? To keep those who are outside of the power structures from gaining power, prestige, wealth, and influence. This has prevented women from being recognized and respected as the powerful leaders that we truly are. The She Leads podcast is here to shine the light on all the incredible women, to encourage us to show up, speak up, and showcase the amazing work we do. Speak with confidence about the innovative and transformational thoughts that we have, and celebrate the positive impact that we are making in this world, both personally and professionally. So let's do this. Let's lead. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the She Leads podcast. This episode is brought to you by the She Leads Podcast Network and the She Leads Live Conference, which is taking place in October of this year. The She Leads Podcast Network is the network for women by women. I am so excited today because our next guest is Victoria Hajjar. She's the founder of Ugli Ventures, which specializes in assisting startups as they scale from 6 to 7 figures. Victoria focuses on aiding female entrepreneurs in optimizing sales and marketing strategies, team building, and leadership development to establish sustainable, profitable 7-figure enterprises. This stat, I can't believe that it hasn't changed, but less than 2% of women have broken through the $1 million mark in their business, and Victoria is on a mission to change that. That is why I cannot wait to speak to her today. We talk about this here on the She Leads podcast all the time. Victoria has a proven track record of success. She's cultivated global brands across various sectors and countries, including the US, the UK, China, Sri Lanka, the UAE, and Mexico. Welcome to the She Leads podcast, Victoria.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
I cannot wait to have our conversation today because this is the thing. I talk about this all the time. I cannot wait to hear how you help women get from 6 to 7 figures, break through that $1 million mark. I don't know what it is, but it is incredibly challenging. And I have a theory that when women start businesses and we pattern our businesses based on the way that men have created businesses, it does not set us up for success. We're building something that is not for us. So that's my theory. I haven't proven it. I'd love to do research on it, but I want to hear from you. Tell us, how did you get to be doing what you're doing with Ugli Ventures?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. You know, it's been a 15 plus year career in marketing. And I started my ranks as, an assistant and worked up as marketing manager and director and eventually chief marketing officer for various organizations around the world, working exclusively always directly with founders and investors and key stakeholders. So that's really a unique part of my journey, is that I've always had this portal into just founder psychology. And in the beginning of my career, most of the people I worked with were men. And so I was able to sort of build this foundation, understanding leadership and business growth through the lens of strong male leaders. And it was about, 10 years into my career where I consciously wanted to make a shift to start working more with women. because I believed so much, and from hearing stats like this, that my curiosity was that there was something behind this statistic. There was something driving this 2%. And I started first kind of going into the funding side. I was really looking at, okay, well, there's a lot of bias in funding, and that must be a major reason why these stats are the way that they are. But as I started working more closely with female leaders, what I've observed is that there is a certain set, it's really like a mindset that I think men bring into business, especially when it comes to sales and marketing, that I feel like women do a little bit differently. And just as you said, I think that there's this misconception that we need to sort of act or drive the organization in the way that our male counterparts do. But for so many reasons, I feel like that maybe doesn't fit instinctually with women's need for just maybe it's, cultivating deeper relationships, or there's a sense of loyalty or that sense of teamwork, which may be a little bit different than how men build businesses and build teams. So that was sort of like my first observation and by the way, I've worked with some really incredible female leaders that do adopt kind of that male attitude. But for me personally, I didn't connect 100% to that. And so I've been kind of on this mission to find and cultivate that in the communities that I have, a different way of doing things, where we can be maybe more nurturing to our teams. Because at the end of the day, it's about an attitude, it's about a mindset, but it's also about practical systems. And that's kind of where, in my mind, the mindset meets the tactical pieces of business. Yeah, so it's been a very interesting journey, to say the least.
Well, I feel like I have a very, very similar background to you. So I started out in corporate, in marketing, and I actually, early in my career, I have an economics degree, so I got into finance. So I was always in the room, with male leaders. And you realize after a time that even though you go in as a young, strong, smart woman, that things are not the same for you as they are for your male counterparts. Even people that I attended college with, that I was working side by side, there was a difference with the way that they were treated versus how I was treated. And it was so unfortunate because I was so naive. I thought we were the same. So it's very interesting to see. And I don't know that it's comes from an evil place. It's just that there seems to be a more natural way that men fit into the corporate world than women. And I too think that, marketing and even especially sales, that is the driver of revenue for businesses. It's what businesses rely on to keep going. And businesses need to be hyper-focused on revenue growth. Otherwise, there's no business. And I think that the way that business is structured and the way that corporate is created, it was very much designed for a traditional male role. At the same time, more and more women are starting businesses, and we're trying to figure out, well, how do we earn that revenue? What do we do? How can we do things differently? Because it doesn't work. We cannot be men. We just aren't. So I'm really, really curious. What do you focus on in your work with your clients today through Ugli Ventures? What do you have women really focus on in order to grow their businesses to that 7-figure and beyond mark?
Yeah. Well, I want to touch back onto this idea of mindset. So I primarily coach and mentor women who have reached 6 figures in revenue and are working towards 7 figures inside my accelerator. I have an accelerator program called the Scalable Marketing Machine Accelerator. And inside this accelerator, we go through a framework that is the framework that I've implemented across dozens of businesses around the world. And essentially, it's the framework on how do you create a successful marketing department. And this is really important because we need to shift our mind from thinking that we need to, with our own hands, learn and execute all of the pieces of marketing, right? I think that there's a lot of messaging, which actually, it kind of boils my blood a little bit because I don't see the men that I've worked with thinking this way. There's a lot of coaches and consultants or course creators that communicate to female entrepreneurs that we need to really learn it all ourselves. So what this means is, take this course on how to run Facebook ads. Take this copywriting course, take this, social media management course. And this is, I think, one of the things that are holding us back the most because we want to learn, which is great. We should be in that growth mindset. We want to understand, but part of us feel like we need to perfect it before we can give it away. And so when I look at how successful men are looking about building teams and have built their business from the start, I think there's a deep understanding of a buy-in that is needed when it comes to sales and marketing. There's an absolute resolve for all successful founders that I've worked with, both men and women, that they must understand the high-level strategic fundamental pieces of sales and marketing and need to understand the core metrics that they need to be monitoring to measure what success looks like. But there's no indication of me needing to execute this with my own hands in order for it to be right. And so I think this idea of doing everything ourselves, and again, there's so much communication to us as women entrepreneurs around burnout and all these things because it's so real. It's so real that we are doing too much. We wait way too long to start getting the support that we need. And it's that idea of, and I keep coming back to this in conversations where, that statistic where women applying to jobs and how qualified we are when we apply for jobs. Usually, women are, 100% of the qualifications are met before we would consider applying for a job, and men are maybe at 50 or 30%, right? Yeah. And I think that mentality that is so deeply ingrained in us carries us into entrepreneurship, where it's like, we need to understand and do well at something and understand something 100% and have success in it before we can get that support in order to help us. But it's actually, I believe, we go faster and we go stronger when we focus on cultivating the right team that's going to help us build the business, right? So I think that's the one huge piece of the puzzle, right? We need to be understanding things from a higher level, from a higher strategic level, and understanding what success looks like, as opposed to being in the weeds all the time. Because when you're in the weeds, we don't have the time to do that pullback. And that's really what keeps us stuck going in circles and circles. Because a part of my core philosophy about marketing is really looking at everything that we do in marketing. Every single piece that we execute in marketing should be an interplay, should be connected to each other. And too often we get stuck in this rut of executing pieces of the marketing in silos. And when we're working in silos and we're in the weeds, it's like you can't see the forest from the trees. And that's when we kind of get on this hamster wheel of pushing and pushing and pushing, and then wondering why we're not seeing the dominoes fall, that we're not seeing the effects of all of that. So that's one thing that's huge. And so that's why I'm so passionate about sort of teaching the systems, but from this high level perspective. So the scalable marketing machine is really looking at brand communication, looking at marketing growth strategy, but then looking at team and leadership. Because I think that there's a huge piece of marketing leadership that is not talked about quite often, which is as a founder, your job is really to lay that high level strategy, make sure that it's being executed, but really connect yourself to the performance, like understanding what the performance means for marketing. So that means understanding your numbers, the most successful founders I've worked with, and I'll tell you, so inside my accelerator, I work with 6-figure founders, right? Working towards 7 figures. And that's what I help them achieve. But as a consultant, I've had the pleasure to work with multi-million-dollar entrepreneurs. I've even gotten to work with billion-dollar founders, some of the most successful female founders in the country. Ooh. And I've seen this rule apply to the most successful founders I've worked with. These are the foundational pieces. The other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to mindset is tenacity. So I think that maybe it's something that is in contrast inside of a lot of women. And I've experienced this myself, which is, how do we be strong leaders and get results, be results oriented, but still be kind and supportive? And I think this is what you're speaking of. So let's talk about this a little bit, because I think that is the crux of the issue. How do we get performance? How do we get results and stay connected to that, bring that tenacity to what we're doing? Like, so we push, right? We push our team, but we still maintain like something that feels very important to us as women and very natural, is that nurturing part. So I don't know what your ideas on that, or if you've seen that.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, first of all, I think everything that you're talking about, I'm just really taking it all in, because I think about this stuff all the time. And I know for sure through observation, through reading articles, through talking to successful founders, that the key to growth, scalability is delegation. That's it. You cannot, you said it, you cannot do everything yourself. You have to be the leader of the team. And one of the things that I want to jump back to or dive into, and maybe we don't need to do it right now, but I think that there's societal issues which keep us from delegating, right? That's very much ingrained in the fact that we need to do it all and be perfect and all of that stuff. So it's unwinding and unlearning all of that. And then the second piece is, I think that there's plenty of women that would want to hire a team, but they just can't figure out the revenue piece of it. How can I possibly hire someone who's at the level that I need them to be when I can't even pay myself in my business? So I'd love to kind of talk about that and get maybe some practical tips or suggestions, because team and delegation, those are 100%, at least some of the keys to success. Mindset, I totally agree with you on. And one of the things that you just said, it almost, triggered me, because when I worked in corporate, I worked at one of the big 4 accounting firms, and I was working on the internal marketing side of the house. And I had a pretty large team. I had a team of 20 people, and every single one of them were women, and they were great. But half of them loved me, and the other half of them hated me. And what I found out is that one of the reasons that they hated me is because I expected performance from them. And I am not a mean individual. I don't have a mean bone in my body. But when I, demanded that we get work done, because that was what my responsibility was, I was actually called to the table for it. And I was punished for demanding that my team work hard. And one of the remedies for that is that I needed to take the people that didn't like my approach for cupcakes and coffee and really kumbaya and be their mother. And that is not what I thought work was all about. So, I eventually left there. It was definitely not the right fit for me, but I was really taken aback, because my whole career in corporate, I had gotten to a certain point because I was so efficient and my team worked well, and we got shit done. That was it. At this particular firm, they didn't value that as much as this sense of collaboration. So it's funny because I'm a woman and I love to collaborate, but I think because I was sort of brought up in corporate, I had that mentality that you get shit done no matter what. And it
Exactly.
didn't sit well. So it's almost like my whole identity was shaken because I had done so well almost adopting a male, push forward, get shit done mentality. And the fact that I was a woman acting like that, it didn't jive with this particular firm.
Mhm.
And I left and started on
Mhm.
my entrepreneurial journey, which has been so challenging. I mean, entrepreneurship, I love it so much. And yet I can't crack the code on it. So one of the things
Yeah.
that I would love to talk to you about is how to crack the code to get from 6 to 7 figures.
Yeah. Well, okay. I love all that. And there's two things here. So I really want to hold on right now to this idea of these opposing ideas of what it means to be a leader and how do we bring that tenacity. This is the thing that I have to say is I don't, for me, it is also triggering, right? It's like, how do you, and I've been on both sides of it, right? Because I'm an entrepreneur, but I also do still serve clients on one-to-one consulting as a fractional chief marketing officer.
Mm.
So what does that mean? That means that I'm held accountable to report on the scorecard metrics. I'm held accountable to the investors, the key stakeholders. And in the beginning of that experience for me, as I started progressing in my career, and it's just like you in corporate, it changes you when you are having to present the performance to key stakeholders. And most of the time, in my experience, they have been men that have a different attitude towards money, especially if you're talking to investors, right?
Yep.
That experience has been, over the years, I've cultivated sort of a strength in being comfortable in those very uncomfortable situations where it doesn't matter, what happened or didn't happen or who didn't get X, Y, and Z, LMNOP, or who was sick or whatever. It's like the numbers on the paper are the numbers on the paper, right? You need to get there. And through those experiences, I've had to figure out a way to cultivate that performance within my team and the teams that I lead, the teams that I work with. What I have found is that the attitude has to start with who you're hiring. So that's how I'm going to connect it to getting help on the team.
Mm.
So in your experience, right, and I know listen, I've talked to a lot of women who have experienced the same thing with their teams where, half the, and if they're in an environment with all women, half of them will kind of step up to the plate, right, and kind of see a pressure as a challenge to rise up to the occasion.
Yes.
And then some people will feel victimized. And I think
Yes.
it's part of how we are brought up as women. I don't think that it's, and also I think that, well, this is like a totally other topic, but I think it's also part of how millennials grew up. And, I'm like an older millennial and sort of how we've been sort of assimilated into culture of what, everyone gets a gold star, everyone gets the trophy kind of thing. And then when you get into this environment where a leader or a boss or whatever is demanding something or sort of pointing to someone that's not working up to standards, I think it can feel very attacking. It can feel very uncomfortable. So let's go back to the question of how do we get help on our team when we can't pay ourselves? Okay.
Yes.
Because I think it's all connected. If we're in this stage where we don't have a team, there's a really practical exercise that I go through with all of the founders that I mentor to understand who we really need on our team. Because that's the first step, is really understanding, if I was to get stuff off my plate, what would I get off my plate? And this is like a first essential exercise to go through, because I think that we tend to have this like all or nothing attitude when it comes to like hiring people or whatever. And the practical reality is that we can get help in our business for a very, very small investment. And oftentimes that investment is going to help us, or the idea is that that investment needs to help us there has to be ROI in that. And then when you're first getting help when you're first getting help in your business, those people that are helping you, they don't have an ROI in themselves, because the ROI is unlocking your time to focus on your highest level tasks, which are usually sales and marketing, right? And so the first step is really, and I have a process in my accelerator. The first step is we go through kind of a time audit, right? And so what I would suggest to anyone that's in this moment, because marketing is usually the piece that takes up the most time for founders, right? It's the thing that occupies ourselves, right? And maybe that it's sales and marketing, maybe it's networking or whatever, but that's the piece that moves the needle, right? And so I would say first is doing a time audit for, 1 week, really documenting what you're working on each hour of the day, right? And putting it into a Google. I do this periodically, and I just color code different activities into my Google Calendar. So when I open up the calendar at the end of the week, I can see in a color coded way, I spent this much time on these types of tasks. So it's like, if it's administrative, like sending invoices or clearing your inbox, you can color that one way. If it's like content creation, you can color it one way. If it's like engaging on social media, if it's actually face-to-face with clients, you kind of want to do an audit of what you spend your time on. And I also want you to think about, what are the sales activities that you're doing? So are you getting on sales calls? Are you doing something in order to produce sales calls, right? And I'm talking to a service-based business here, right? Yep. In a product-based business, that could look like, what are the activities that you're doing in order to make sure people are coming to your website, right? Or know about your brand, or how are you marketing your products? So you want to really understand, in these task lists that you're creating and this audit that you're doing, what are the pieces of the puzzle that essentially need you? No one else can do it. And what are the pieces that really don't need you? Anyone can do it, like an assistant can do it. And you can start with literally 2 hours a week. You can go onto Fiverr, you can go onto Upwork, and you can look into a virtual assistant. There's plenty of very affordable options. But the idea is that you need the velocity by which you're bringing money into your business is going to supersede your costs. So you have to have an understanding of what your costs are, right?
Yep.
But I think that it's mission critical that you pay yourself first, even to something very, very small, and then grow it from there. And I think a lot of times this idea of, what can I pay myself? How much does it cost? It starts with, okay, understanding your expenses, right? Understanding that income, and then doing that time audit. And that's going to give you a lot of information. But if you're not making enough money to pay yourself, it's because you're not focused enough on those revenue generating activities. And so that first investment is going to be, how can I get some of these non-critical things off my plate, which are, a lot of times it's like inbox, administrative stuff. It could be even posting on social media, or helping to create some of the content, just assisting with the content creation, and really starting small. And then what I find is, when you have that responsibility, it really helps you think in a different way. Because if you're like, oh man, I got to pay this person, it puts a little bit of fire and pressure under you that also unlocks different ways of thinking,
Yeah. I love how this all ties back to mindset as well, because everything that you're describing, you're putting yourself into a position of leadership, and you're making decisions that are logic based and in black and white or color, however you kind of look at that. And you're saying, okay, I am in command and control of my schedule and what it is that I'm doing, and how can I best execute what needs to be executed for my business. It's a shift in mindset from, I'm a founder, oh my God, I have to do everything, I'm so overwhelmed, to, okay, how can I change this outcome? And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, that is really what is needed, fundamentally, in order to go from 6 figures to 7 figures. It's who you are.
100%. I want to give everyone listening a gift, because this was a huge gift that I got just recently that really crystallized things. So I have this opportunity in my one-on-one consulting business, which I so lucky to only serve a very few amount of clients in this way. And mostly it's like information gathering, so I can share it with my cohort members of my accelerator. But most recently, I've had the privilege to work hand in hand with, I think, one of the country's most successful female entrepreneurs, Samira Madani. She built a $1 billion unicorn business with Stacks, which is a payment processor, and she's based here in Florida. And having the experience and being able to work with her hand in hand and be on her team, like, one of the things that I really have done over this time working with her is try to understand her mindset. And a couple months ago, we were working through a campaign, and we had obviously targets for the campaign, sales targets for the campaign. And in the beginning of launching the campaign, it wasn't going as expected, right? It wasn't performing as well, and it didn't look like we were going to reach the target. And I remember having a conversation with her, and this is where the pressure comes in. And the mindset piece was, I don't miss targets. I don't miss, and it wasn't unkind. It was matter of fact. I don't miss targets. We don't miss targets. And I remember internalizing that. And I was like, I don't miss targets. I think this is the most critical piece for any entrepreneur, right? Is that you are going to set a goal, set a target for yourself. And the mindset, you've decided already that this is what I'm going to achieve. I don't miss my goal. I don't miss my target. And you have to put that pressure on yourself. And you can see how having that mindset and that attitude, that's going to affect how you show up with your teams. Now, I want to say that we ended up doubling our production for that promotion. Oh, we doubled our target. And it was, I 100% believe it was because, now think of it, she's my client, right? I'm essentially on her team, right? She put that pressure on me. And I want everyone listening to this, I did not leave that meeting with the idea of like, oh, how dare she, or we're doing so hard, or this person was sick, or it's because this technical piece isn't working. No, that I went to it with the attitude of like, I'm going to rise to the challenge. I'm going to take on that mindset, and I'm going to make it work no matter what. And that's what we all need to succeed in business. That's that 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9 figure founder mindset. And it was such a gift. And I think that is when we say like, yes, we can bring kindness, we bring support, we nurture our teams. And the most important thing we can do is cultivate a strong team that has a very strong connection, right? But we cannot dismiss the fact that we need to cultivate a high performing team in order to reach these ambitious goals we have for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so practically, it's like, I love the practice of having a goal and having specific metrics to measure yourself against. And the reason is because the biggest gift you can give yourself is to not hit the goals that you put to yourself and have a moment of frustration where you think to yourself and you talk with your team. And even if it's just one person working with you, a virtual assistant, 1 hour a week, you sit there and you brainstorm and you're like, how the hell are we going to get to this?
Yeah.
How are we going to get to this? Because it's through that line of questioning that's going to actually get us to where we need to go. The problem is that we don't go through that process, most of us, especially us, like working alone in our homes, being our own bosses. But we have to go through those motions. We have to go through those motions of creating the goals, putting real numbers down on paper, and checking in with them every single week, really. I check in every single week for my business. I call it a CEO date with myself every Monday, where I look at those things. And if I'm not reaching a target, I have that mindset of I don't miss targets. And this has been so beautiful to stretch your mind and get more creative on who do I need? How am I going to bring this in? And it's really this idea of committing to your own success. Does that resonate? Yeah.
Yes. This is gold. It really is. Yeah, right? And it's growth mindset plus grit plus commit to yourself, which is everything that you said. And I do think that you need that frustration piece to stop you,
Yeah,
because it gives
exactly.
you the opportunity to say what's working, what's not working. And I do think that it is important, even if you are a solo entrepreneur and even if you don't have anybody working for you, to even reach out to people that are in your community or in your network. Like, I'm really struggling here, because we can only see what we can see. The other piece that I wanted to throw into my little equation there that I blanked on for a second was design thinking, right? So
Absolutely.
design thinking is all about, okay, what are all the different options? What can we do? What can we experiment with? Let's look at things from a completely different perspective and see if we can unlock something. And I agree with you. I don't like to make sweeping statements, and I always do, but I don't know that women do this.
Mm.
I think that what happens sometimes is we fall into a little bit of self-pity. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I do it myself, believe me. I just think because we have so much responsibility for like every single thing in our lives, in our kids' lives, in our husbands' lives, in our partners' lives, and everything, that we're just tired.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Amen.
I think we're
Absolutely.
just freaking tired.
Yeah, exactly.
And men don't necessarily have that.
Well, and I think that like this is why like this essential practice of setting goals, setting targets, and checking in with them periodically is like the practice that you need.
Yeah.
So oftentimes,
Yes.
I'm extremely scatterbrained, right? I've got two kids, definitely have ADHD, like all of us these days, it seems like.
Yep.
And so I think that the first person we need to learn to lead is ourselves, like
Oh,
hands
yeah.
down. And I always like to equate this with like if you're trying to get healthy, right? If you're trying to get healthy, but you have a bunch of junk in your house, you're making it so much more difficult for yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you're an entrepreneur and you do not have systems that you follow or your days planned out or your goals planned out, you also are setting yourself up for failure. Like you need to, when you sit down at your desk, have a plan and have your marching
Yeah.
orders because
Yeah.
it's all of us, all of our
Mm.
tendencies to get distracted, and we do have so much on our minds and all this stuff. So, but I can tell you, there's two things that I've implemented in my life that have been absolutely game changing. The first is on the mindset piece. Absolutely get into rooms where people are doing what you want to do and have achieved more than you. Because
Mm.
in order to want to hold yourself accountable, you need to see that it's possible. Because otherwise, you're like, oh, but why not? That's never going to happen for me. It doesn't matter. No, you need to see evidence of others that are where you want to be and that has happened for them. And that could look like
Mm.
joining conferences like your conference, right? Or getting into masterminds or whatever, but interacting with women that have achieved great things that are super ambitious. The
Yeah.
next thing is one thing that I've done, like if you, let's say that you really are in this beginning and you're not ready to invest in getting things off your plate and getting help. I think the first way that you can start sort of leading yourself is to get an accountability partner. So through conferences, through masterminds that I've been in and met these other ambitious women, I've cultivated friendships with women that with like my business bestie, we do a weekly accountability call every single week, no fail. If we're like tied up with kids or something's happening, we do something asynchronous on WhatsApp or whatever. But we always check in with each other and hold each other accountable. And I've done this for years, and I've had different accountability partners through the years. You have to find someone that is going to take it seriously, but it can be a game changer for step one, which is leading yourself. Because it's going to
Mm.
be difficult for you to get any help in your business until you understand how to lead yourself. And what do you do in that accountability meeting? You check in with your goals for yourself and your
Mm.
KPIs for yourself. And even if you don't know how you're good, like what those goals should be or whatever, it's like, hey, I'm just going to read you what my goals are each week. I'm going to show you my most important statistics, which probably is like, my email list growth and how many sales calls I've made, or my email list growth and how many sales I've made. Just check in with them every week. And even if you feel uncomfortable and you don't know what to do next, the mere practice of showing up every week with someone else and looking at it starts to unlock that stuff. Like, again, back to that uncomfortable feeling. It's like you just keep showing up and things will come to you.
Yeah. It's just like going to the gym. You're not going to go in and lift a 20-pound weight on day one. But if you start with 5 and up it to 7.5 and keep going, that 20 pounds is not so far away. And that is exactly what we need to do. I do agree with you that we need to build those muscles. Your advice is so practical. It's so spot on. And I love the fact that it's like we need to take it all and commit to ourselves. That is also, I think, one of the biggest shifts because we're so other focused. So it's like, let's rein that back in, stand in our power for how powerful we are. I mean, oh my God. And claim it and then commit to us instead of committing to helping every single other person under the sun and the person that you see out on the street. And
Absolutely. 100%.
So much of what you have said today hits me so hard. And I really hope that it hits everybody that's listening as hard as it is hitting me. I needed to speak to you today. This was so good.
So happy. I'm so happy because it is my mission. Like, I think that we all, especially when we're starting in entrepreneurship, I feel like it always feels like an uphill battle, right? So I think that, I love the idea that I have put myself into these situations with, been able to get into the rooms with just massively successful founders and take these nuggets back to the rest of us, right? On how it works. But the last piece I want to really bring home too is that even with 8 and 9-figure founders that I've had the honor to work hand in hand with, I will tell you, I always go into those situations as a team member expecting that person is going to have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I can tell you absolutely, and this is why it also goes back to mindset too, they don't have all the answers.
No,
they don't.
No.
And I think that's, we go and we kind of, we're always consuming, right? And I'm listening to podcasts all the time. I'm always learning, but we come to this idea that everyone else knows better than us. And there's something that they all figured out that we didn't, right? And the actual truth is that the key is just keep moving forward, keep showing up, and trust that you're going to learn and grow and keep going. And that's the process for everyone.
Such good stuff.
Yeah.
How can people join your incubator, get in touch with you, bring you into their lives?
So much. Yes. So I have some really great resources for you, right? So marketing is overwhelming, right? It is the piece that gives the most overwhelm to founders. So my company, Ugli Ventures, the aim of our mission is really to take all of those ugly pieces of business, which usually, let's face it, have a lot to do with marketing, and turn them into something beautiful, which are beautiful marketing systems, but more importantly, giving you the confidence to lead your marketing confidently. And so in order to start there, I created a free guide that you guys can go ahead and grab at Ugli Ventures, and it's ugly with an I. So it's UGLIVENTURES, ugliventures.com/overwhelm. And I have a guide on how to end marketing overwhelm. So you can start today with sort of creating your most core fundamental marketing systems. So you can start stepping back a little bit and having that high level view of everything that's going on for your marketing, and in turn, what's going on for your sales, and kind of get yourself out of the weeds, because that's really the first step, especially when it comes to organizing your marketing. So uglyventures.com/overwhelm. And then from there, there's all my social links and stuff like that. I like to hang out primarily on LinkedIn, and you can always reach me there, DM me, ask me questions. I would love to hear from you.
Amazing. Well, I know that as soon as we're done here, I am going to go download that free resource and fill that information out. I appreciate you so much. I loved our conversation today. I know our audience is going to take away so much from it. So thank you so much for everything today, Victoria.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
This and all of our episodes are brought to you by the She Leads Podcast Network, the podcast network for women, by women. Thanks so much for listening to the She Leads podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support us, please share it with others, make a personalized post about what you took away on social media, and please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. This helps our guests and our show to continue to gain visibility and traction. To learn more about how She Leads Media helps women to gain visibility, you can follow us on Instagram at She Leads Media, or you can head on over to sheleadsmedia.com. If you'd like to network with me and other amazing women, don't forget to join us each year for the She Leads Live conference. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon. This is the She Leads Podcast Network.